Hi, my name is Russell Axford. I'm the head of executive search at Clarity Recruitment. Today on Behind the Numbers, we have a dear friend, Alex Macdonald, Chief Financial Officer at Enthusiast Gaming. Alex, thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me, Russ.
So Alex, I'm curious to learn a little bit more about who you are and how you've become the CFO at Enthusiast Gaming.
Sure. My background, I am a CPA CA. I started my career in auditing and consulting. And essentially, from the very beginning, I had a focus on public companies. I was auditing public companies, and I was also consulting for small public companies, which perhaps were too small to have CFOs in-house that could fulfill the financial reporting requirements of a public company, or they were operational focused CFOs who needed to be unburdened of that process. So I did that for a number of years at a small accounting firm, and ultimately a partner there who was on the audit committee of a TSXV company, or a company in the process of going to the TSXV, approached me and said he needed a controller with a public company background. And I ended up taking that job, and I became the controller of a TSXV listed company. Helped take it public, helped list it there, and then worked very hard. And within a year, the CEO went to the board and actually nominated me to become the CFO. So quite quickly, I found myself in that office at the age of 29. We had a very good run. We raised a lot of money, did a lot of corporate transactions. I stayed with that company over 4 or 5 years, but we actually turned it over a few times. A couple of changes of control, a couple of acquisitions, a couple of disposals. And ultimately, after 5 years, I decided I would look for another opportunity. That opportunity came up in early 2019. I was doing some consulting work for some listed companies, and I was introduced to an opportunity out of British Columbia from the Aquilini family, actually. The Aquilini family, a prominent Canadian family, most well known as the owners of the Vancouver Canucks. And they had said that they wanted to enter the eSports space and enter it in a big way. And in doing that, they established a company called Aquilini Game Co. And the mandate of that company was to acquire an eSports team, raise a bunch of money, and then go public onto the TSXV. So with that mandate in place, they began their search, and my background and my skill set working with junior public companies was a good match for that, and I was introduced to them, and I ended up becoming the CFO of Aquilini Game Co. And then after 1 year, through a series of transactions, here we are. I am the CFO of Enthusiast Gaming, who we merged with in September.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
And if you look back over the past 12 months, what has that journey been like as the Chief Financial Officer?
It's been very exciting. A short list of things that we've done in 12 months. We've done 3 large rounds of financing for a total of 55 million Canadian dollars. We did acquire a company called Luminosity Gaming, which is now our flagship eSports brand. We also went public through a CPC called J55 Capital Corp, which listed us onto the TSXV. And then during that process, we were working with Enthusiast Gaming, who was already public on the TSXV, and we ended up merging with them as well. In fact, those transactions ended up taking place on the same day. So we did a reverse takeover onto the TSXV in the morning on a Friday in August, and that same afternoon we merged with the public company Enthusiast Gaming.
Wow.
Which resulted in us going public twice in the same day. So that was quite a journey. In addition to those transactions, we acquired a company out of Sweden called The Sims Resource, and in October we acquired a company out of the UK called Steel Media. And I'm also proud to say that subsequent to that, I was working with the TSX, and as of January, we've successfully graduated from the TSXV to the TSX.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Thank you.
And if you look at it, how does a esports company make money?
So an esports company makes money much in the same way that a traditional professional sports team would. We do have events, and we do have ticket sales. We do sell merchandise and concessions at these events and online. In addition to that, similar to a regular sports team having broadcast deals, we pursue and we've obtained significant amounts of broadcast deals through streaming deals on the internet historically. That's a big part of the industry, and that's an important part of the industry, that streaming revenue.
Okay.
In addition, sponsorships are becoming increasingly important. Big companies and big brands, they know that they need to reach esports audiences. They know that these audiences are huge, and they know that these audiences are the perfect demographic for them, and they're trying to find more and more ways to reach those audiences, and we provide that vehicle. So no different than Coca-Cola or Scotiabank may sponsor the Toronto Maple Leafs. Brands like that will sponsor esports teams as well.
Wow. Okay. And if you look at the industry, I've been told that it's bigger than Hollywood or the music industry. Where do you see this going in the next kind of 3 to 5 years?
So when we look at esports, and esports, we see it's really a section of the video game industry. And you're right, the video game industry is not only bigger than Hollywood and not only bigger than music, it's actually more than twice as big as Hollywood and all of music combined. So
wow.
This is a massive, massive industry, particularly when we think about the subset esports. Where I see it going, I think that first of all, people realize that this is a big thing and it's getting a lot of media attention. And I think a lot of people are seeing that their kids are watching professional esports matches and they're following the players. And the modern celebrity really are these players or these content producers. But what I don't think people realize is that the industry is already as big as traditional sports. There are esports matches that garner tens of millions of viewers. Yeah. In fact, the League of Legends finals held last fall had a viewership of over 100 million people.
Wow.
To put that in perspective, that is larger than the TV audience of the Super Bowl in the United States. So I think that we're often asked, will esports ever overtake traditional sports? And sometimes we say, well, look, maybe it already has. Now, where I see it going and how we're going to see it enter the mainstream, if it already hasn't, is you will start to see more of it on your TV, on your computer screen. You'll see it more prominently on places like YouTube and Twitch. It already dominates Twitch. You'll also start to hear about it on the radio or in your sports updates. We have had matches on places like TSN. Our Overwatch team played in the grand finals. Our Vancouver Titans team in the Overwatch League played in the grand finals in October, held in Philadelphia. Now that was held in the same stadium as the Flyers and the 76ers play.
No way.
And they filled the stadium. And the online audience was over 10 million people. So that's a finals match, and it gets that attention. I think what we will start to see is we'll see more playoff matches on TV. We'll see larger streaming deals with companies like Twitch or YouTube or Mixer, which is owned by Microsoft. And in addition, I think ultimately we will see regular season teams and regular season games broadcast on television and prominently on the internet.
Wow. It's, for comparison, you look at the US Open and it takes 33 years to get to where it is today, and the purse is, say, $3 million, yet, esports, it takes 5 years or so to get to $3 million. It's very innovative.
I agree with that. There are tournaments in the esports world at prize pools exceeding 30 million or 40 or 50 million. In fact, now in the esports world, a $3 million prize pool would be considered relatively small.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And where do you think the biggest opportunity is for a company like Enthusiast in this industry moving forward?
So for Enthusiast, we have 3 pillars to our business.
Okay.
Those pillars that we've defined and we've anchored ourselves on are esports being one, but also media and events. The media side of our business is a collection and network of over 100 websites, all video game related. In addition to that, there's 900 YouTube channels. I believe that the media side of the gaming industry, the video gaming industry, will be a behemoth. It will be massive. Gaming and esports are the prevalent and the dominant form of entertainment today. And when we look at the media side, in the future, as marketers and brands want to reach certain demographics, there is a shift in the way they can advertise occurring, and I think it's going to continue to occur in the next few years. And that's being caused by changes in privacy laws and changes in technology from the big companies like Apple and Google. Small example, these companies are now becoming more and more resistant, and some of them won't share your device ID. They won't tell the sites you're visiting or the apps you're using the ID, the unique identifier of your phone. And what these technological changes and these privacy law changes are going to cause is it's going to make it increasingly more difficult for these brands to reach the communities that they want to reach. Now, when we, in our media segment, have these communities, we have 100 websites, more than 100 websites in our network that are video game community focused. These are fan sites, these are bulletin boards, these are content sites and news sites, and I think I'm pretty confident that in the future, in fact it's happening already, big brands are going to realize if you want to reach these audiences, you're going to need to do it by reaching them inside their communities. It's going to be a community-driven approach.
And when you look at the industry as a whole, it's very new. In your opinion, what would be an industry that you think would be most comparable to an eSports company?
Most comparable to an eSports company? Well, I think the direct parallels are, of course, traditional sports. It's interesting how similar they are. We do have rosters of players. We trade and we scout and we enter leagues, and these leagues are franchising. We now have certain teams that represent geographic territories, like we have the Vancouver Titans and the Seattle Surge. Those are in the Overwatch League and the Call of Duty League, respectively. And the parallels are becoming more and more clear. The structures are very similar. The form of entertainment is very similar. It's a competition. In its own way, it's a form of athleticism that I think humans have been attracted to and cheered for thousands of years. Even the value, I think that there is a scarcity developing in this market, similar to the scarcity in professional leagues, professional traditional sports leagues. So I think it's a very, very direct comparable traditional professional sports leagues and esports leagues. And I think that as the time goes on, we're seeing that comparison become stronger and stronger.
Very fascinating. And do you ever think that we'll get to a time where salary caps come in, like other traditional sports
Absolutely.
teams?
You're spot on. Not just salary caps. I think we're starting to see the early stages of franchising, geographical territories being established, formal league partnerships being established. I think the next steps will be things like salary caps and whatnot. I think that collective bargaining will come down the pipe in a few years.
Okay.
I think that player unions may begin to be established to protect the players and to promote their interests. And when we're here talking about financial professionals, that's a big element of it as well.
Do you have tax or risk compliance that you have to be looking at?
Well, there's a lot of that, but even just preparing for that and understanding it, and tax is always a consideration in any transaction. If you're not considering the tax implications, like every transaction you do somewhere has a tax implication, so that's always a consideration. Compliance will be more so when the collective bargaining agreements are struck. Of course, maintaining compliance with them. We have seen, not for us, but in certain leagues where salary caps have been implemented, that certain teams and organizations have tripped over them by accident. There are certain organizations that have done things like provided stock options to their players, and unbeknownst to them, they tripped over salary caps and received large fines because of that. It's going to fall to the CFO office largely to monitor those things and to be aware of them. They come quickly, and going back to our earlier conversation, these organizations have been assembled in a few brief years, a lot of them, and when in the absence of established infrastructure to monitor and control these things, it takes a professional sound mind and professional judgment and professional awareness and the CFO has to be prepared for that. But the industry's getting exciting, and I agree with you. Collective bargaining's coming, salary caps are coming. The league's becoming more and more formal, and I think that's a good thing because that's going to establish them as a permanent presence, a controlled presence. And we're going to start. You're going to be turning on your TV one of these days soon and seeing one of our teams playing.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. And Alex, when you look at yourself and your career, 29 CFO, and now you're at it again. Where do you think in your life did you do anything that maybe set you up for success to be able to step into a role like this at such an early age?
I think for me, I think like most people, I knew where I wanted to end up. I was attracted to the boardroom. I liked the allure of it. I liked the mystique and the romance around it, and it seemed very cool to me. And the influence that room can hold, and being a business leader, I think many of us want that. I had to figure out how to do that. What the unknown is always, how do you get there? For me, I actually received some very sound advice from my father, and he told me at a young age, if you focus on public companies, you could become a CFO of a public company one day. And I always think back to that conversation, and it was very true. I defined my niche relatively early, and that was publicly traded companies, and it's a very specific skill set. It's a unique environment. I mean, there's less than 2,000 companies on the TSXV, and there's about the same on the TSX. And if you think of all the companies in Canada, that's a fairly small population. However, with that, there's really a lot of opportunity, and being strong in compliance, being strong in financial reporting, having an understanding of the securities laws. Having that skill set can really take you a long way in a public company, and it definitely did for me. So defining my niche, honing my skills of public companies, and things like continuous disclosure obligations and securities law really helped me break into the public company space. After that, it was just a lot of hard work and making the right connections. Having a lot of respect for your colleagues and the CEOs you work for, and that's how I did it. Defined it early and worked hard along the way.
Good for you, man. And you mentioned it a second ago. Your father gave you some advice. Would you say that he's a major influencer in your life? Was he an accountant? How did you get into accounting?
So he's definitely a major influence. He is an accountant. He is a proud CA. He's been with a number of firms over the years. He's chaired a number of firms, and I mean, how I became a CA, it was almost the same conversation, and maybe he was leading me the whole way. But when I was after I graduated, I actually have an arts degree. I have a degree in history, and I faced an issue at that moment. Like, what am I going to do? This degree, although I believe in the value of it, it didn't define my path like I had, perhaps that you need at that age. So in conversation for him, he just laid it out. He said, "Look, this is the path to be a CA. You have an entrepreneurial spirit, and CAs and CPAs are well equipped and to enter these positions of influence in businesses." And he laid out the path, and he said, "You already have a degree. These are the courses you would need. Why don't you think about it?" So next thing you know, I'm enrolled in additional university courses and finance courses and accounting courses.
Good for you.
I excelled at them, and before long I was right in the UFI and articling, and the rest is history.
Oh, there you go. Cool. And then, when you look at, and you reflect back on life experiences, you spent some time for the Canadian Armed Forces. Did you learn any skills or experiences there that maybe parlayed into the professional setting that helped you be successful?
Well, definitely. Canadian Forces was a wonderful home for me. I enjoyed my time there very much. The skill sets that I think have applied are I mean, your basics maybe, the ability to just work very hard, to be very resilient. I don't view challenges as large as I probably would have had I not been in the forces. Things don't seem like they're such a big deal. And an obstacle doesn't seem so difficult to overcome. And then, of course, there's other basics. I mean, having self-discipline, the ability to push hard, the ability to push yourself to 110 or 150%, which is a requirement when you're in the forces, of course. And even the small things like the way you carry yourself, your dress and deportment, the way you speak to other people, and professionalism. And I think it shaped me a lot, and it provided some wonderful training, and it was a great home for me.
And Alex, when you look at a high growth organization that is growing through M&A right now, what type of leadership skills do you think a CFO needs to be able to manage that complexity?
I mean, when it comes to leadership, high growth industries are unique these days. And just to provide some context, we can think back, imagine over corporate history how long it used to take to build hundreds of millions of dollars of a company or billion-dollar unicorns. I mean, to be honest, the first ones, it took centuries. Things like Hudson's Bay Company or the Indian trading companies. And throughout the 20th century and after industrialization, of course, you have companies like your General Electrics and your General Motors doing it in a couple decades, and then we saw technology birth billion-dollar companies in a decade or less, things like your Microsofts and your Apples. And most recently, we've seen billion-dollar companies, things like Uber, become the largest, most valuable private company in the world in a few short years, and there have actually been unicorns born within 1 year. Now, the reason that's important when we think about leadership qualities in the CFO office is in parallel to that, we live in an environment of increasing regulatory oversight, increasing complexities in GAAP, a lot of compliance issues and complicated tax issues. And in a rapidly growing company, there's an expectation that those things are handled by the CFO. But these companies do not have the control environments or the systems established that companies that established themselves over decades would normally have. So we're reaching similar sizes very quickly without the infrastructure behind it and the processes that maybe were normally established over 10 years of trial and error, or 20. So with that said, a CFO needs to be very quick on their feet. You need to react. You need to be adaptable, and I think you need to look ahead. If you are not planning as quickly and and being as forward-looking as the operations team, you're going to be constantly playing catch-up. And with that, I think the leadership qualities, you need to be reliable. You need to be professional, of course. You need to be sensitive to your team and understand in these high growth businesses that being an accountant or a finance professional on a finance team in a high growth company is not the easiest place to be. It's a constantly changing environment where not many things are predictable, and that can clash with typical financial processes. So with that said, I mean, resilience and show courage and lead your team through all the M&A and lead them through the year ends and lead them through the changing control environments, and remain positive and be a trusted advisor to your CEO, and most of all, just be reliable for the company.
So Alex, explain to me what a CFO does at a eSports company. I know that can change, but give me a typical week.
In addition to all of those things, as these companies, as high growth companies continue to grow, the amount of stakeholders increases substantially. Of course, you have your shareholder base, which for us, being public and being a growing company, is increasing quite rapidly. But we also have many other stakeholders. It could be our employees, it could be our advisors, it could be time I need to spend with the board. But as a public company, we spend a significant amount of time communicating and being in the markets and presenting and making sure that our name is known out there. I think that at the size that we're at too, a CFO needs to recognize that you got to start to have an eye south of the border.
Okay.
For example, recently we've been marketing in the United States. Yesterday, the CEO and I were in New York City, and this can be a substantial amount of your time. We flew in very late Tuesday night. We got to bed around 3 a.m. and by 6 a.m. we're up and we're hitting the street for our first presentation at 8. After about 8 presentations throughout the day, we're rushing to the airport to get home and make it to the office the next day in time.
Wow.
So that can be a strain, but and it can be a significant portion of your time. But you have to be able to balance these things. There are external requirements as much as there are internal requirements, and you have to balance, you have to plan, and you have to be ready for them.
Outstanding. Thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
And so we were fortunate enough to work with you. We placed you into your current role. What was your experience like working with Clarity Recruitment?
It was successful. It was easy, to be honest. I remember Clarity had reached out to me when I was still in my former role, and I think that a lot of us have the instinct to ignore cold calls or cold messages, but I didn't ignore that one that came from Clarity. I don't know why, but it might have been timing.
Sure.
I wasn't introduced to Clarity prior, but Clarity made it very easy. They said, well, why don't you just come in and let's chat and let's talk about your history. And I think when people are entering the job market, as I was at that time, you have a nervousness that, okay, what am I missing? What are my holes? What are my weaknesses? What am I going to be overlooked on? When I came in here with Clarity, you kind of walk in feeling like it's going to be a job interview, but it's not. Clarity was good at identifying my skills and making those connections and realizing who I needed to talk to and who would want to talk to me. It also, just at its core, not having to comb job postings and hit the phone all night long and have that stress, to have that relieved from me. To be honest, it was not a stressful time, even though I was exiting my former role and I was uncertain about where I was going to go next, and I was faced with the pressure of CFO jobs. That's pretty difficult to find. That stress was completely relieved by Clarity's efforts. I had full comfort and confidence when I was in Clarity's hands.
Alex, thanks very much for coming in today.
Oh, my pleasure, Russ. Good to see you.
You too.